shocked to bits when the election started, because if there's one word politicians love to bandy about willy-nilly, no, it's not willy-nilly, it's the F word for family. So why is this notion of domestic conformity so useful to those seeking election? We decided to put the family into this week's spotlight. If you're not decent or hard-working or in a family, then look away now, because this election is certainly not for the likes of you.
To fight on behalf of hard-working families.
Unless you qualify to appear on Family Fortunes, forget it. Politicians aren't interested in voters who don't fit their ideal of the perfect family unit. No manifesto launch or policy announcement or election photo call is complete without a nod and a wink to the nation's kinfolk. From tax breaks for married couples to paternity leave for fathers, you only get something for nothing in this world if you stick to the rules of the game. So come May the 6th, are decent, hard-working families the only people who need bother marking their ex? I like that noise. We should use it when we're having a quiz. And we are going to have one if we have time. Sneak it in. Tony Parsons, welcome back to our program.
Thank you for having me.
Where do you think the family now fits in 21st century British culture?
Well, certainly in this election campaign, it's what we call in creative writing classes the centre of goodness. I think it's the absolute, it's what God would have been once in wars. You know, they want to claim the family, and you see it every day, and you see it everywhere. You see it in the prominence of the wives, you see it in the confessional nature of the interviews that Cameron and Brown have given, and you see it in the latest giveaways, you know, tax breaks for toddlers and tax breaks for married couples. And I think it's because hard-working decency is not necessarily the phrase that would immediately spring to mind about this Parliament and, you know, the expenses and Iraq and Blair's millions and all the rest of it. I think politicians have never been as toxic as they are right now, and that's why they're all claiming the family as their own.
Do you think our political elite thinks we as voters value the family more than we really do?
I'm not sure that's true. I mean, you can hardly blame politicians for trying to convince you that they're nice people when they're collecting your votes, and they do seem, you know, a family orientated bunch, and actually the British family is much more diverse than you would know from these three guys and their family.
Talk about it.
Absolutely. But I think it's really that central point. It's the centre of goodness. It's their credentials as decent human beings at a time when politicians are not thought of as decent human beings.
Do people still vote, do you think, on family issues? Do family issues swing how people vote for parties?
I rather doubt it. I mean, I think people may be generally consoled to see people who appear to be normal and have children. I think that's probably quite important, because many voters do have children, and people who have children think their children are the most important thing in the world. So if their leaders don't have children, they think, well, these people can't possibly understand what I've
had to go through
with schools and, you know, the problems of adolescence and all of that. I agree with everything that you said a moment ago about how family is playing in this campaign, but I want to add one extra element. There clearly is on the Tory side a belief in the broken society, and I'm sure we're going to hear more and more about that. There is a belief that something is going very badly wrong on the estates, and they think that one of the most important things in what's going on in the estates is that kids are having kids too early in their lives before they're ready to take on parental responsibilities, and that's going through the generations, producing, you know, one generation after another of kids who don't have the support they need in their families. So there is a really kind of fundamental point about how the Tories view society, which is being conveyed in this tiny proxy of the allowance for married couples and those in
Do you
civil
agree a
partnerships.
bit with that analysis about family breakdown?
What I think is the polls, the research shows the voting public faces two ways on the family. if you ask people, they all aspire to be part of a 2.2 family. So in our hearts, we all want to be part of a family. But in practice, intellectually, the British voting public understands that families come in all different shapes and sizes, which is why the Tories tax break for families plays very badly with women, actually, because women understand that all you're doing is taking away money from families with dad, taking away money from single-parent women to give to women who happen to have a dad, and they understand that's unfair.
I think also, you know, the tax breaks for toddlers and the tax breaks for the conventional married couples, it's at a time when I think the vast majority of the electorate thinks, but we're skint. You know, and what we're worried about is becoming Greece. You know, we don't want to be the Greeks of Northern Europe.
So why are you fiddling with all these taxes?
So, you know, so we don't buy it. You know, they're like, you know, bankrupt drunks offering to buy a drink for everybody in the pub. You know, we just think, well, it can't.
The other thing that affects
not the
the attitude to the family is that even people in deep suburbia who are part of a 2.2 family know people who are single parents or a different type of family. So although our hearts say one thing about families, we know actually the world is different.
But the political parties still clearly think there's a symbolism in being seen to do things that would boast of the family, even if it's only at the margins, and even when they've got no money. You're saying that the tax for toddlers, better paternity leave, even Labour recognised it in inheritance tax. They made it a family inheritance tax, and the Tory marriage tax.
I mean, perhaps they're hoping that people will apply the word family, which they hear on the lips of politicians, to whatever arrangements they have, because families are very complicated, and sometimes we talk about family breakdown, but actually, on the whole, there isn't family breakdown. It's that families are different from what they used to be, or anyway, the couple at the centre isn't what it used to be. But it's obviously still very, very clear that, you know, grandparents are connected to their grandchildren. Very often they may be the main support for grandchildren if the couple in the middle have split up. And therefore, I suppose they're hoping that almost everybody thinks they're in a family, and so when they hear the word family, they'll react positively to it.
Tony?
Well, I think that some families, I think we agree that some families are just beyond the pale. These kids that are having kids very early, and they're stuck in a cycle of crime and poverty, and there's this terrible educational apartheid that we've got in this country. And I think people want to stop that. They want to break that cycle. But I think it's such an enormous problem that I don't think the sound bites about broken society, I don't think that you know, it's just so huge that how do you stop these kids from producing kids just like themselves when, you know, those of us that were lucky enough to grow up in one of those solid old-fashioned conventional, we had the father there like a rock, and his example was there for a lifetime, and even after he was gone, you tried to be the man that your father and your mother would have wanted you to be.
Isn't the harsh truth, Diane, that politicians don't really know how to put a family together again anyway, and they're not sure that they should?
Well, you certainly are going to put the families together again with, you know, tiny tax breaks. And, you know, one of my party's favourite phrases is hard-working families. I always think, what happens to the lazy families?
Well, the indecent ones.
Yeah, you know, because they have children too, and those children deserve a break.
And that's really
as well.
that's the subtext. It's the feckless, indecent, lazy families that are really
up against.
Yeah.
But there is a lot. Michael referred to. There is a lot of sociological evidence now that some of our most intractable. You see, the problem. No one really now objects to family now being defined in a variety of ways, as opposed to the traditional way. But we've paid a price for that at the edges, which has been the complete collapse of any kind of family in a meaningful sense, and that's where our social problems lie.
I think all three of us have said that, but the question is, you know, is there anything that politicians can do about it?
Yeah.
I mean, one thing is, I make this point from time to time on this programme, the British never want to look at what anybody else does, even if they're only a few miles away. I mean,
in Holland.
As in Holland.
Which you've mentioned.
Where they have 1/7 of the teenage pregnancies that we have. Why doesn't someone say, well, look, we might do what Holland's do?
I can see a new TV series of yours. Instead of a railway journey,
Good idea.
you'll be off to Holland. Don't go in winter, though. It's quite cold.